Hey ho, let's go. Hope everyone's having a day filled with awesomeness. Thank you for tuning in to Pugsley's Pit as for the second time. We invade the airwaves of WOFX radio as part of Levack Goz Show, 95.9 FM, 980 AM on the iHeartRadio network. I am Sean Pugsley Martin. This is episode 106 of Pugsley's Pit. And as we always do this time of the show, we begin by asking you the question, where else would you rather be than right here? Boom! Right now. By way of introduction, I'm a freelance sports writer for the Albany Times-Union, avid sports enthusiast, big-time homer for my sports teams. Without apologies, you can follow the show on Twitter at Pugsley's Pit, taking the podcast on the YouTube channel at Pugsley927. Yes, he's back. Tom Goslowski, friend of the program. Welcome back to the pit, my friend.
Thank you, my friend. And this is the interesting part about this. You mentioned this is the second time that we have the invasion style of Pugsley's Pit. I have to thank you for this because for those listening on the traditional radio side, since Levack Goz came over, since this afternoon drive time slot has been a thing for the last year and a half, I've promised to myself and hopefully some listeners who remember this, that this was going to sound different than anything you've heard in the Capital Region before, that we're going to try some different things, do some things a bit different. We understand in the world post-COVID and maybe far before that, how you consume this content is different. So now this is a double edition. If you're listening to Fox Sports on the iHeartMedia app, Levack Goz, Anchor, and Spotify, you're hearing this. And we wanted to do a little cross sport for the digital content creators in the Capital Region. That man I'm staring at right now in Sean Martin. So this is cool. This is both digital and on air as we move into the Pugsley's Pit invasion takeover of the radio side here, which, although you are taking over the show, I'm going to sit behind the driver's seat, as they call it in radio. So I will be driving, but you're more than welcome to bump me and elbow me and say, let me take the wheel for a second. So with all that, yes, with all that being said, in 2 weeks from now, we are going to be talking about week 0 college football action. We are going to be talking about college football. So I guess before we can talk about week 0 and week 1 and all the other good things, let's start with something you and I are both passionate about. That's college football. Let's just start with the top teams. Because I have an idea of who I think are the top teams. Your thought may be a bit different. When you're looking at the landscape of the 2024 regular season in college football, who do you believe will be some of the top teams this regular season?
I think right now it's all Georgia. They're the layup pick, right? Carson Beck just under 4,000 yards last year. They bring back a lot of players. And the one thing about Georgia, and they have NFL players up and down that roster anyway. The thing about Georgia is they got a chip on their shoulder. They thought they should have been in the playoff last year. Maybe a little something extra to prove to get them through the offseason and through camp to hit the ground running when the season starts. I think it's Georgia's world, and we're kind of living in it. But after that, I got a lot of questions.
Yeah, Georgia feels like the team to beat because they're so deep. And if you want to make this a drinking game, if you go back and listen to this like 2 or 3 weeks from now on the digital side, you're going to notice the theme. I'll keep saying the word depth as we do our college football talk, because that's going to be the storyline of this season for a variety of reasons. Georgia's so deep. Like, you could have the second or third stringer for Georgia, the 18, 19, 20-year-old kid, play, contribute, and be really, really good. I'm going to add 3 teams to the Georgia mix, though, although I got no pushback on the Bulldogs and how good they've been. For me, if we went to Rivers Casino and they gave me this prop, I would struggle to wager on who I would take. And that's if you gave me the entire field in college football, every team as one bet, or Georgia, Texas, Oregon, or Ohio State is the other 3 plus Georgia, I feel like I would almost take the 4. Like, that's how good it feels like. It's Georgia, then everybody else of that 3, and then everybody else. I don't know if you have a feeling about Texas, Oregon, or Ohio State. I feel like one of those teams you despise, and Ohio State is a Nebraska fan that you are. And welcome to the club now, Oregon. I guess let's start with the Big Ten teams. How do you feel about Oregon and Ohio State?
Here's the thing with Oregon, and thank you for asking about them, right? So when we last left you, Jim Harbaugh in Michigan was dominating NCAA. Levack's probably still basking in that one, and he should. and Nick Saban retires. So it's a whole new landscape, right? But here's the thing with this, the teams changing conferences. Ohio State's the team to beat the big for sure. Although there's questions. There's questions. There's questions of quarterback. They ran poor Kyle McCord off to Syracuse because he lost one game. Here's my problem with Oregon. Dan Lanning's a great coach. He's had 2 great years there. That talent-wise, they got it. Here's the reality that they may find out. The Big Ten is not the Pac-12. And I speak that from being a Husker fan from 14 years ago. We went to the Big Ten. Like, we're going to take over. We're going to, with the speed, the athleticism, we're going to take care of this conference. We're going to own it. That didn't happen. Been in a conference title game once or twice. That's it. Oregon they're not going to be able to play that high-speed flash and dash style and survive in the Big Ten, because if you watch the Big Ten, it's a grind. It's a grind. And it's even some of the down teams, you got to go earn it. And it takes something out of you as the season goes along. We'll see if Oregon can handle that grind.
Yeah, that's the oddest team, the Ducks, to get a hold of, as you mentioned. The perspective there of being a Cornhusker fan and seeing the transition to a conference, because Oregon historically, as you mentioned, like the team that invented the high-powered, hybrid, super speed offense. When everyone thinks of Oregon football, why they got good, they think of 2 things. They think of cool jerseys and uniforms, and the word cool can be interpreted how you want, and super fast offense. Last year was a little odd because they did run the football and have big guys, but that doesn't matter because it's like you said, okay, you have big guys who can run the football. You're in the Pac-12. Who are you smashing around? Like, the idea that the Pac-12 biggest offensive linemen, those guys, can match up to the Big Ten, we'll find out. I think those are very fair question marks. And back to your Ohio State point, it feels like Ohio State, the reason they get so much love, again, super deep, take another shot if you want, 4 or 5-star talent. But when your biggest concerns are you don't have a quarterback, and you've given this team, isn't the talk the $30 million roster? Like $30 million of NIL money. The last time I saw that much money soaked into a program was Texas A&M. And they went like 8-4, and the coach got fired. So be careful when you start giving teenagers millions of dollars and just assume they're going to do what you want them to do all of a sudden.
That's it. Here's the problem with Ohio State. They have, for all the reasons you listed and the fact that Michigan has owned them recently, Ohio State has the most pressure on it than any team in the country. Anything short of a national title game appearance, and they were calling for Ryan Day last year when he lost to Michigan, who was the best team in the country. And they lost close. That wasn't a blowout. But look, you lose to the school from up north, there's always going to be they're going to be after you in Columbus. Those expectations and the weight of that, especially the NIL cash, is that going to be an albatross on their back?
It is the storyline that's going to hang over them all season long. Oh, we didn't mention Texas. It was fun for a few years on Twitter, and I was the number 1 culprit. I'll even say the guys' names. I know Jack and DJ and DR, who anytime Texas would lose, it became a thread of, is Texas back? The same GIF. No matter what time of the day I was tagged in that famous intro. Here's the thing about the Longhorns. I mean, if someone's got to throw money out there and throw some money on, okay, no, I just don't want to take Georgia. Texas is a fun bet. They've got everything you want. A first-round quarterback who is a phenom out of high school, a coach who's really good as a play caller. They're 4, and maybe I'm being too critical, maybe 2 plays away from beating Washington in the semifinal game, and they're playing for a national championship. So as fun as it's been to beat up on Texas, when it's hard to find a weakness on a team, that's probably a big compliment of, they can probably win the national championship, when I don't have much to criticize about them this season.
I criticize them because I loathe them with a deep, burning passion. And that goes back to the Huskers being in the Big 12 and the Big 12 doing everything they could to appease Texas because they didn't want to, hunk off the meal ticket, right? Well, now the meal ticket left. I think Oklahoma is going to have a tougher adjustment to the SEC than Texas because Texas is tailor-made for a run. Ewers, I think he's a great quarterback. And you're right. I really thought they were going to beat Washington last year in that semifinal game. I'm glad they didn't. You'll find out early. Texas at Michigan in, I think, the second week. I think that's a September 7th game. So you're going to find out. It's a tough thing. They're going to be the better team taking the field, I think. But you'll find out a lot about them really early.
Let's shift it here because you mentioned Texas there. It's almost the perfect segue from the old school Big 12, the Big 8 to the new school Big 12. And the biggest new school storyline of the Big 12 is Deion Sanders. We'll get to the Colorado Buffalo team and the expectation. I do want to touch on something that happened over the weekend. Have you seen the video that's been shared? Okay. I see you knew, and I'm glad you knew because you knew I was going to throw this to you as someone who sat in many a press conference. And I love getting your perspective on this is because you do this for a living. For those who haven't seen it, Deion Sanders, an absolute jerk to the local media in the local media session, combative, nitpicking, refusing to answer questions from stations because it isn't like CBS. What do you make of Deion's attitude and performance over the weekend to the local media?
I thought it was unprofessional. Let me just make this first. Deion was one of my favorite non-Raiders ever to play in the NFL. I loved him. He's a showman. He had an unbelievable cornerback, one of the best ever. But I think as a coach, my problem with Deion is I think he's more style than substance. And if you're gonna coach at this level, you got to be thicker skinned. And some people came out and said, "Well, he's upset that CBS ranked him as one of the worst coaches in the Big 12." Other people said that CBS did a unfavorable piece on Shiloh, who had a lawsuit going on from an incident when he was a teenager. It doesn't matter, right? Those people are there; they're doing their jobs. And as a coach, especially at the D1 college football level, it's your job to deal with them. So him to be like that, I thought at best it was unprofessional. I could call it a lot worse than that. I think he's trying to do everything he can to control the narrative so much, and he does a great job. I mean, he put Colorado football back on the map, and they won 4 games last year. So he's doing great at what he's trying to do. But at some point, you got to put your big boy pants on and answer a question. And the question was innocent as it was. He just said, "I'm not talking to CBS." Oh, come on, that's ridiculous.
It feels sometimes that college football coaches in this new era of NIL, the new era of the transfer portal, yes, you have to be leaders. Yes, you have to be role models. And I don't want to demean those things in any way, but I always talk about the role as almost being an agent and not the agent you think of like Arliss or Ari Gold, like not that agent, but I'm going to work as a representative in working in someone's best interest. Like, yes, if you have a son or a daughter who's going to play college athletics, you want the head coach to make them a better man or a woman, to be a leader, to be a better member of the community. All those things are great. Again, I'm not trying to demean any of those things. They're incredibly important. But when I say the word agent, I mean there are people who say Travis Hunter and Shador Sanders, a great example of this because he has both of them. My goal is to put you in a spot to be better for the future. My job is not to have the attention on me. It's to have attention on my players and on the school so we can make money, so we can profit, so I can stay employed. I know how as important as the win and losses are, it's how much money my school is making, as you pointed out, because Colorado not only improved in the win and loss column, but gosh, they had how many nationally televised games, how much better were ticket sales, all those things. So that's going to be Deion's problem. Like, it's cool that he's Deion. It's cool that he's prime time, the Hall of Fame, like the Flash and all this, but there are going to be a lot of players who get rubbed the wrong way by that because they are a 5-star recruit and the best player in their state and the greatest thing since sliced bread. And they have 50,000 Instagram followers that the generation some won't work. Like, as much as we know Colorado hit the portal and won a lot, they also lost a lot of kids and they wanted to bash. I think it's an ESPN recent article that like tries to trash the program. So I'm with you. I think it was absolutely ridiculous. I became far less of a fan of Deion after that. There's few things that bother me. That one bothered me. Of like, don't be a jerk to people who are trying to do their jobs. You don't have to be that. And like, let's talk about the team. Like, I think they could be a bowl team. I don't want to wager on them. Like, if they get 6 wins, I guess that's good. But nationally, people are going to roast them if they're playing in the Boca Raton Bowl at 6 wins. You know, like people think they're supposed to be a conference contender this year in the Big 12.
But it's funny. Back to Deion for a second. Yeah, I don't like what he's become at Colorado, but I get it. Because I think it's part of his shtick. But if you go back to a year ago, they beat a kind of a really down TCU team who everybody thought was really good because they were in the playoff final the year before, and There were Colin Cowherd and others saying Deion's going to be the NFL coach next year. Well, wait a minute. Put the brakes on that,
Right.
okay? They got off to a good start at Colorado. The Huskers gifted them about 21 points on turnovers in that game that turned into a disaster for us in September. But 4-8 is 4-8. You are what your record says you are, somebody has said, right? And they had, through the portal, they had no offensive line. He had great stats for a guy that was running for his life most Saturdays. We're going to find out about him. I think they're going to find the Big 12 is a little easier to navigate than the Pac-12. But yeah, 6-6, get to a bowl game. That's probably not a bad year for them. The thing I'm going to watch with Colorado is the maturity of Shedeur at quarterback, because people talk about him as a top 10 pick next year. I don't know that I see that. Yeah, they were getting drilled in one game last year at halftime, and someone said, I don't follow this Instagram stuff much, but somebody had his Instagram account, was promoting some of his apparel at halftime of the game. It was never proven that it was him, but that's just a bad look. That if you're gonna, he's got a chip on his shoulder that he's inherited from his dad, and that's fine if you're a cornerback. But as a quarterback, the leader of a football team, you got to show a little better than that, I think. So his maturity, I think, will be interesting this year as he prepares for the NFL.
Yes, and to add to that, just probably because we're off the Olympic coverage, if beach volleyball is a very watched sport in this house, like the Zlowski house, as my wife's a former college volleyball player, if it was a 2-on-2 team, they might win the national championship. Like if you just had Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter, like you'd do great. You need 20 other guys out there, though. So, we mentioned the portal talking about Colorado. One of my storylines I'm looking at involves both the Big 12, the new Big 12, and the new ACC with new teams. And I'm not avoiding this, but who knows? Maybe a future episode of Pugsley's Pit or some more digital content on Fox Sports 980. My two favorite plays wagering-wise from the college football season will come from both of those conferences. That's like a nice little tease for later on. To the ACC, Clemson, Miami, Florida State. Don't worry, we'll get to my orange and your Cornhusker soon, but let's sit on Clemson for a second. What's going on with Dabo? Like Dabo was like the toast of college football. Yeah. He's the man. And then he just like, I'm not doing the portal like at all. He's just not doing it. It's killing the program that he just refuses to bring in transfers.
Look, you don't have to like the rules, right? Like people got all over John Calipari with the one and done, and he embraced it. He was the first to embrace it. And Kentucky's in the Final Four, a whole bunch of times. Now everyone caught up to him. But with the portal, I mean, Dabo Swinney took Clemson. He gave them the national title. They were in the playoff every year, it seemed like, during that stretch with Deshaun Watson through Trevor Lawrence. This is going to kill him because the game has changed. I don't like it, but it doesn't matter what I think. It doesn't matter what Dabo. That's the rules now. And you can bring in all these recruits, but everyone's been kind of conditioned that nobody wants to sit and learn for a year or two anymore. They want to play, and you can't blame them, right? They work hard. But the portal now, you don't have to sit out that year. You just go. You take off. So him not embracing bringing in, it's going to kill that program. He's going to have to come around.
The ACC is such a difficult conference to predict this season because if you look at that Florida State team last year who went undefeated, some of my favorite stats about Florida State last year were that because of COVID, the offensive line had 60 combined starts going into the season. That's unbelievable. I have 6. What? So Florida State hit the portal, found veterans, Jared Verse, got to give him love, obviously former Albany stud. Florida State became good. 3 teams off the top of my head. I heard this past weekend. This is what helps when you're mowing your lawn. You do your college football research up here when you're getting sweaty and mowing the lawn. Oregon's the only college team in the country that has the top 10 recruiting class and transfer class. Yes, those things are ranked now. Lane Kiffin, by the way, for those who aren't Lane Kiffin fans, there's no doubt that Ole Miss has actual talent now because they've gone 2-2-1 in the transfer class portal. So Lane Kiffin has called himself the king of the transfer portal. They're a lot better. It's working. And this season they have more expectations than ever in the history of that program. And Miami, like the Hurricanes have had, I love this stat. The Hurricanes have had 1 10-win season the last 20 years. And it was that first year with like the turnover chain and that wild Notre Dame game. It's like it was 2017. But now they got Cam Ward from Washington State and Damian Martinez, who I was drooling all over last year on Pugsley's Pit from Oregon State, both playing for the Hurricanes. So it's a really tough conference to figure out. It's going to be a lot of fun, though, to figure out what goes on there. All right, let's get into your Nebraska Cornhuskers, because if you want to talk about social media and drama and fun and excitement and teams with tradition who are looking for next, let's talk about a certain quarterback who's been compared to Patrick Mahomes for your Nebraska squad.
He looks like Patrick Mahomes. The first time I saw him in spring practice wearing 15, I'm like, he's almost got like the same face mask as Patrick Mahomes. I'm like, God, he looks like Patrick Mahomes. Then he shows up at the beginning of camp a week ago, and I was like, look at the resemblance. I hope he can play even just a little bit like him. I mean, the fact that Nebraska, his father is a legend in Lincoln, a center, played with the Detroit Lions for a number of years. Dominic. Dylan Raiola was the hot recruit a year ago. They lost him to Georgia, and then he went to Athens, and I think he thought about it a little bit. He said, I think he transferred to high school in Georgia and everything. And here he is in Lincoln, and he's, fair or not, he's the savior, right? And he knows it. He knows the expectations on him. They're going to need more, and I think he's going to get it. They brought in a great running back transfer from Oregon that's going to help. They got to stop turning the ball over. I mean, this is a team that is just, I don't even want to research the record in one score games in the last 7 years. It's I have enough dents in my head. I don't have to go back and look at that. But I love what Matt Rule has done. But what's going to help Nebraska this year, turnovers, they got to end. But the defense returns a lot of starters, and the defense was top 11 nationally last year. And they got some players on that backside. That's going to really help them and maybe help Raiola ease into it. And plus the schedule, you got first four at home: UTEP, Colorado, Northern Iowa, and Illinois. And then you're at Purdue, Rutgers home, at Indiana. That could very well be 7-0 if they can clean up the mistakes against Colorado and win that rivalry game 7-0 before you go to Ohio State.
Okay, you said 7-0 with Matt Rule, head coach, trying to build a program. Give me a prediction on the win total. You could say 12 if you want, but what's a realistic scenario of how many wins your Cornhuskers can get?
I think realistic, we can get 9. Right? Are they going to go 7-0? No, you know what? For a program that's found very creative ways to lose games late in the last few years, I think it's unrealistic to expect that they're going to clean that up in one off season. 6-1 for sure. But yeah, then it gets a little dicey. You get Ohio State, Iowa's always tough, Wisconsin. But yeah, I'll say 9-3, and that'll be a very, very good year in Lincoln. The Huskers haven't been to a bowl game. The last Husker bowl game, my boys were 4 months old. They're going to be 8 in a few weeks. They've never seen a bowl game. They saw it, but they were goo goo gaga and, not really with it. So I want them to experience a bowl game.
Well, I'll transition from Nebraska to Syracuse awkwardly. There's no perfect segue like I set myself up for the last few times, because I want to push back a little bit on your Nebraska pick, but you did a nice job on that. I just got bit like 3 years ago about betting the Cornhuskers on that early schedule. One of Scott Frost's final seasons. I also thought they're going to start off like 5-0, and they didn't. And I was like, gosh, I don't think I can ever do this again to myself. But I flip it to my orange, which, by the way, you can hear right here on Fox Sports 95.9 and 980 this upcoming fall, and our sister station, WGY, your home for Syracuse Orange football, right here in the capital region. Here's my thing with Fran Brown. Like, he's recruited to a point where at times I'm stunned about the players they have on the roster. This is me if I'm 13 playing a video game. Like, how did I get a 4-star and a 5-star in the Syracuse football team? The roster's loaded. They've got a cupcake schedule. They've got a 5-star quarterback from Ohio State.
Yeah.
Like, this is a dream roster. With all those things being said, Fran Brown, we know, can recruit, but eventually you got to call the plays. You have to be a head coach. Like, let's think about Dino Babers for a second. So Dino Babers, there's things he did great. Pep talks, post-game, pre-game speeches going viral. Fantastic leader. No doubt. He's been a fantastic offensive play caller. He was in the He called it "Orange is the New Fast" off the old Netflix show to show how long he'd been at Syracuse, basing it off of that. So his style worked. Now stopping the clock after the first down hurt him with the new rule changes. The biggest thing with Dino Babers is great play caller, great leader, didn't know what the hell to do with timeouts, didn't know what in the world to do with clock management, just had no idea what to do if he didn't have a running quarterback. So glaring weaknesses came out quick about Dino Babers. Here's what Fran Brown's got. You got the players, you got the Joes, as the old cliche goes. What do you do on 3rd and 2? Are you running the ball? What are we doing on 4th and 1? What are we doing down 8 with 3 minutes to go? We punting? We going for it? See, I rarely ever drop the we, but I don't even drop the we there in the sense of Syracuse football. I'm like, as a coaching staff, what are we doing? You know, if you're going to make a collective decision, that's wonderful, but you're the one with the headphones on and the ref's looking at you. So Syracuse for me, I think 8-4 is realistic because of the schedule more so than the talent. I hope it's 9-3 and 10-2 in college football contender, probably like you are for Nebraska, but
Sure.
I don't know if he's a good coach. I don't. Sean, I'm going to be screaming Pugsley's Pit. I'm going to be on here yelling and screaming about 3rd and 1 calls because I don't know if Fran Brown knows what he's doing yet. I think that's a very fair criticism.
I should thank you, by the way, not to change the subject, but thank you for Tony White. When Nebraska hired him, I called you and I said, what do I got here? And this guy just transformed it. Yeah, look, Syracuse, I'm looking at the schedule. It's there. And I love McCord. He flirted with Nebraska before Raiola flipped. And as soon as he did, he left. You got a winner there, and that's where it starts, right? So maybe he'll get himself a clock management coach that Babers should have had. You know, they have those. It's just like the get back coach in basketball.
I hope so. I could talk college football all day with you. If you're enjoying this college football conversation, by the way, make sure you continue to listen to Pugsley's Pit. We continue to roll on this digital version of Levack Goz. Our terrestrial radio side is still hearing it. We're going to transition now from college football to Major League Baseball. And we sit here in mid-August, and both the New York Yankees and the New York Mets are in playoff contention. Let's start with the New York Yankees. Aaron Judge hits another home run. They've got a primetime series with the Seattle Mariners. I'll toss it over to you. This Yankee team, from super hot to super cold to hot again, what do you make of this 2024 Bronx Bombers squad?
They're a tough group to figure out, right? Judge is having another great year. They still haven't paid Juan Soto. Hashtag fiscal responsibility. They need to pay him. I don't know. I one thing that jumps out to me, they're 32-27 at home. You would think that would be a little better. They've been great on the road, 38-22. I have real concerns about their pitching. Cole is not himself yet. Did they rush him back too early when they kind of didn't? Did they force that? I don't know. Stroman's been terrible. Heels over his career high in innings. I think he's probably going to regress a little bit. We're in the dog days of August now. And Rodon is Rodon. I have grave concerns about the Yankees, and then I don't think they're getting a whole lot of help. You hear Yankee fans, not a whole lot of them like the bullpen. So, and they didn't do. I don't think they did enough at the deadline to help.
Yeah, it's this New York Yankee team is extremely difficult to figure out because we've done this all spring and all summer long. Like with my guy Levack, who is a big time Yankee fan. There are days where he's come on this show and yelled and screamed about this team's winning the World Series and this team's the best team in baseball and that my beloved Baltimore Orioles are bums. And there's days where I'm like, gosh, it feels like that's the truth today. And there are other days where somehow the Yankees didn't make it on the show till far later in the program. And somehow we had half shows and vacations the first week of July and we didn't mention it. But that's how the Yankees have been. I agree with a lot of the things you said. Like, Carlos Rodon is supposed to be the man. He hasn't been. I call Rodon the one bad pitch every outing. Like, don't just throw it over the middle. Just yell fastball if you're going to blow this for the team. Marcus Stroman, he's been rough the last couple starts. Yeah. Maybe lay off Twitter. I predicted this summer he was going to have a meltdown on social media. We haven't had it. He's decided, let's not do it on Instagram. Let's just do it on the mound instead. We'll just have the meltdown in front of everybody during the games. And the thing about the Yankees, and it almost feels like the theme of this side of the show is, again, we'll bring back the word depth. Like, gosh, if Soto ever gets hurt, if Judge ever gets hurt, Stanton, I know he's been hurt, but man, it feels like they fall off. I mean, I see some of these lineups they trot out there. I'm like, this is the New York Yankees,
Yeah.
the division potential champion team. And why there's not more depth? Look, it could be because of the farm system. It's good because of injuries. They're just not deep. Now, I say all of those things, and we all still have to realize that by the time you listen to this or the time you're listening, they could have the best record in the American League by next week. You know, we're complaining about the team with the best record in the American League. So if their name was, and I don't mean to do this to hurt your team, but if they were named the Oakland Athletics and they were doing this right now, everyone would be saying this is the greatest season in 30 years for your A's. But because their name are the Yankees, everyone wants to find something wrong with them.
Yeah, you know why? I'll tell you why. Because in the Bronx, by the way, I love the Jazz Chisholm pickup. Right?
Yeah, me too.
Great player. The problem with the Yankees and the Yankee fan, for the Yankee fan, is that anything short of a World Series title is a failed season. Right? So the Yankees are measured, and through their own doing, that's the culture George Steinbrenner cultivated all those years, that anything short of that is a disappointing season. And so when it's great, yeah, it's great. But when it's not, it's, oh my God, what are we doing here? And that's where I talk about getting Jazz was a nice pickup. They can hit, they can score some runs, although they've had some weird line, like you said. I mean, J.D. Davis got DFA'd by the Oakland Athletics of all teams, and he was batting cleanup for a while with the Yankees. Go figure that out. I mean, someone's got to help Booney there with the lineup card. I just don't get it. But again, it goes back to the pitching. You're not going to win games 9-4 in the playoffs. That's not how it works in the playoffs. You get teams' best shots. You get teams that actually have depth in their starting rotation that can hang in there with you.
We shift from one New York team. Yeah, we shift from one New York team to the other New York team. That's the New York Mets, where if we got in a time machine and you and I talked in March, who knows? We might have actually done this now thinking back. I don't think we did, but if we talked about this in March or April and said, okay, you guys have to make a prediction about the 2024 New York Mets. What do you think is going to happen? We both probably would have said, ooh, they're going to be in a weird spot where they might be close to the playoffs, but if they have to make a decision on Pete Alonso, they're probably going to deal him because they're going to be a little too far out and you don't want them to walk. Sure enough, they're not just in the playoff mix. They've been at top of those spots. They've been rotating back and forth between trailing in that spot, not trailing in that spot. They've benefited here in August by the Atlanta Braves deciding to somehow forget how to play baseball and tank all of a sudden. This Mets team, to me, is going to keep hanging in. It feels like there's more equipped teams that have better pitching and have had more success recently. The Diamondbacks got to the World Series last year, the Braves and others. This Mets team feels like they won't give up, and they are becoming a little more interesting and fun to root for because of this attitude developing this 2024 squad. What do you see in the Metropolitans throughout this summer?
Here's what I see. Okay, here's our starting rotation right now, the depth chart. Jose Quintana, Luis Severino, Tyler McGill, Sean Manaea, and Jose Budo. Egads. But Pete Alonso's Pete Alonso. Francisco Lindor's having a great year. He's finally the player he was in Cleveland now with the Mets. But Edwin Diaz has returned. I mean, he lost his job, late June? Right?
Yeah.
He's got it figured out now. They are a fun team to watch. I'm rooting for the Mets, and I actually think if they're one of those teams that if they can ride this wave for the next not even 2 months, 7 weeks, if they can make the playoffs, they're going to be a tough out because they seem to have whatever that factor is that gets some of these teams through the tough times, they seem to have it. Kind of like you brought up the D-backs. The National League, the last 2 World Series reps were the 6th seed in the playoffs. And so the Mets, I think they got some gamers on that step. They're not going to shut you down, but they can give you some innings.
Get to the dance. It's the old March Madness cliche, right? Get to the tournament, get to the dance, and see what happens. I love that baseball expanded the postseason. I was never a fan of the one-game wild card. Teams with 100 wins were felt like they're getting cheated out of an opportunity. I think back to that Cubs-Brewers when they were both tied for the division, and the Cubs eventually didn't even make it to the next round because they had to do double one-game sets. I think back to the Mets. I believe they were involved in a one-game wild card with the Giants. Gosh, I want to say it was DeGrom versus Bumgarner, where it's like, imagine if you didn't get Bumgarner in the postseason, if I'm remembering that correctly. They would have been fine. But this idea of being the 6th seed, as you mentioned it, teams from the National League can make a run at it. I mentioned my O's in passing, and I get to talk to a non-O's hater in you because you're a fan of the Oakland Athletics. I'm fine with Baltimore, and I know I'm being cautiously optimistic because it felt like in 2023 they were just happy to get the T-shirt, happy to celebrate in the locker room, just happy to be here. You know, the old cliche at the award shows, I'm just happy to be nominated. It felt like they were just happy to be in the postseason. Jackson Holiday's gotten hot. He's hitting a few home runs now. It feels like the kid's got the monkey off his back. When you look at this Orioles squad, true contender, World Series potential winner, what do you like or dislike about my beloved O's?
I love the O's. And honestly, look, I filed separation papers with the Oakland Athletics Baseball Organization for this year. If they move, I'm out. Okay. So my fan free agency quest, I'm down to 4 teams, and the O's are on that list. I love the O's. I love what they got. They drafted great players. We talked about it last time we were together. They drafted great, and they developed them. I don't understand what they were doing at the trade deadline. Now Gray Rod's a little dinged up. Corbin Burns has been a godsend. Good for him. I would have traded 1 or 2 of those blue chippers and gotten in some experienced arms to help down the stretch. I still think they can win the division. I still think they will win the division. And I think they're going to the World Series. I think they're going to find a way to get there, but it would have been a lot easier of a road to get there if they brought in at least one more arm. Because they're in that spot where you can't play all these kids. You got to get them at bats to keep them going.
We hear this word used a lot in horse racing, especially during Saratoga, the word value. Our guy Brian Mariano is going to join us on Friday. He always loves that. We always give him grief about using the word value, but you mentioned it there. Like when the minor league system is so stacked for Baltimore and they're not in the majors, they have no value unless you trade them. We'll use another cross sport comparison, like fantasy football, right? Some people love drafting 2 or 3 quarterbacks in a 1 quarterback league. Okay, if they're on your bench and you didn't trade for them, they're scoring 0. They have no value unless somebody gets hurt. It's just like the minor leagues. Your backup right fielder is not going to play unless somebody gets hurt. So I'm with you. Like I wish we could have seen an opportunity or a big blockbuster trade for any team really in baseball, because it would have been fun of the old school days of seeing guys like CeCe and Verlander, and even though it didn't work out, Sonny Gray's like huge arms really getting dealt it on them. I feel like, gosh, I want to say Roger Clemens got dealt at the deadline to the Blue Jays. Maybe that was right. But like hearing these massive arms get dealt, because even the thing with Baltimore, Corbin Burns has been really good. He's going to be in contention for the Cy Young Award when it's all said and done. I fear that he's going to be a Met next season because of the connections to David Stearns and Milwaukee and everything else, that they're going to see him hit free agency, and Steve Cohen's going to be like, we want him. So Baltimore doesn't realize that this might be the best staff they have in a while. So there are some questions with the O's. There's questions with the Yankees. The Guardians are probably going to get hated on, because if all that stuff we just said about Baltimore, we could say all the same things about Cleveland. That Cleveland's got an opportunity to go all in. Cleveland's got a chance to knock off these teams. They got a better farm system. They weren't active. Oh, yeah. And by the way, there's teams called Philadelphia and LA in the National League that when we look at the World Series, like it feels like the Dodgers, even with all the pressure we just put on Baltimore and New York and Cleveland and Philly, I still feel like the Dodgers are under more pressure than everybody else, because they've gotten further than everybody else and haven't got the job done besides the COVID season.
They spent $1 billion on contracts, and I still don't see what's going to be different for them on the mound in October. I don't see it. My man Clayton Kershaw, one of my favorite pitchers ever. I cringe when I watch him in playoffs, because I'm like, where's the Clayton Kershaw of the regular season? So, and Dave Roberts, right? Is he a good manager or not? Yeah, they won the World Series during the COVID year. Okay. And I chalk that up to Kevin Cash screwing it up for Tampa Bay, over managing. But if not when, now for the Dodgers. I think it's the Phillies. They've been struggling lately. I think they're the team to beat. Zach Wheeler's up top of that rotation. Suarez has pitched well this year. Philly, Baltimore, probably the two. I like Cleveland. I like Stephen Vogt. I love Stephen Vogt. He's an A's legend. The garbage can team down in Houston, no. The team to look out for, I think, in the AL, if Seattle can find a way to start hitting with that starting staff, that's a starting staff that could win any series because of Gilbert and Castillo gets it together, George Kirby, they can pitch. And that's what wins in October. But that team is just so offensively challenged right now. It's hard to really give them too much of a chance as it stands.
I got to go back to Seattle. Drives me crazy because every year I feel like it's the year for them, and they had that streak of longest consecutive non-playoff teams in 20 years, and they got there. And it feels like Seattle's, until they prove it to me, I'm going to pause for Seattle, although they'd be fun to root for. I'm doing the math in my head. There's a chance Baltimore plays Seattle, so maybe I've already convinced myself to root against them. I do want to go back to something you said. I want to get the update because you mentioned that you are leaving your A's fandom because of how bad ownership's been. And if you are listening on the Pugsley's Pit side, you already know about that. If you're listening for the first time on the Levack Goz digital side, go find some episodes. Go follow Sean Martin on Twitter to find out the battles he's had over A's ownership. Who are the other three teams in contention for this, and when could we potentially get a decision on your new favorite?
I do give an out. The A's aren't going to Vegas ever. Okay, they're not moving to Vegas. They're going to screw that up. If they go anywhere, they're going to end up in West Sacramento, where there's just nothing there except for 110-degree heat and artificial turf field. And if that's what they choose, then good luck. So this year, I'm kind of trying to not watch too many A's games. It kind of eases the pain a little bit. Last week, I had 5. I was down to 5. They were Atlanta, Baltimore, Philly, and Boston. Although I'm not over the 1975 playoffs when the Red Sox beat the A's, and my first playoff loss as a baseball fan after the A's won 3 straight World Series. I had the Yankees in there. Really, just one of my kids is a Yankee fan. I'm like, boy, wouldn't that be fun? But no, I just can't do it. And my problem with the Yankees is I can't listen to them on the radio and I can't listen to them on TV. The announcers are just too much. Michael Kay's on. I actually thought it was an AI hoax from Michael Kay on this radio show suggesting Major League Baseball should recalibrate the lineups in the 9th innings. And I'm like, this is a joke. This can't be real. And it was. So I can't do the Yankees. So those are the 4. Baltimore, Boston. Boston's close. Mrs. Pugsley's from the Boston area, so that'd be fun. But I don't think it's going to be the – but the A's and the Phillies and the Orioles are probably the big 3.
As much as I'd love to have you as an Oriole fan and welcome aboard, here's what I kind of like this idea just as much. Like, there have been rumors floating around that Major League Baseball was going to expand for a while, that they were going to go from 32 to 34. I know the Nashville Stars had been rumored as a potential team. Gosh, there was another team that was out there that was being rumored. I'm blanking on right now. It would be more fun, although all those teams are fine, that like you were the first to embrace the Nashville Stars. We had a guy we worked with named Kyle, where Kyle was a kind of a hockey fan, but he wanted to be the first Vegas Golden Knight fan, and it worked out well for him. So if you make a decision by the end of the year, I'm hoping it's Baltimore. But if this goes on for like 2 years, if this is like the Bloodline WWE version of a storyline for Pugsley's Pit, and you hold off till a new franchise emerges and you're fan number 1 of that team, I'm also for that play.
I'll keep that in mind. You never know. I never say never. I think one of the allures to Baltimore is I know so many Red Sox and Yankee fans that when I really want to kick it up, my obnoxious meter has no ceiling. And I love getting into those with people, and that's just a lot of fun for me. So.
You know what? I don't even know if you're doing this on purpose. I don't know if you're speaking in code, but you keep setting me up so perfect for segue. Levack should take note of what Pugsley's doing right now, that I'm reading his cues and codes of, You're speaking of obnoxious people who are rubbing it in people's faces and love talking trash in sports. Let's talk about the Americans in the Olympics, shall we? Let's talk
Absolutely.
about Team USA at times being very American on the podium. Joel Embiid and company enjoying the booze. People sometimes say we are loud, obnoxious Americans. God, there were moments like that during the Olympics, but I don't want that to be the storyline of the Olympics. Let's do this question. I feel like my answer is different on Thursday of last week, Friday of last week, and now Monday when we speak on this last week of what's the moment that stands out to you. So I'll hold my answer for now. But for you, I'll give you up to 3 moments. How about that? When we think back to the 2024 Summer Olympic Games in Paris, what are 1 to 3 moments that you're definitely going to remember and always stand out for you?
I'll give it 3, right? And a lot of it is just I always root for Team USA, but I love everything about the Olympics, and I love the passion you see from countries. Julian Alfred winning the 100 meters women's race from St. Lucia, the reaction of the watch party there on the island was just priceless because it's 100 meters. That's like the signature race of the Olympics. That was great. I would have said the U.S. men beating Serbia because that was fun to watch. And what I enjoyed about it was the USA is, they're not as good as they were in the Dream Team 92. The world is caught up. But you saw some of the best players in the world playing with a lot of fire and a lot of passion just to get enough by Serbia. But to top that was Steph Curry yesterday and during the gold medal game on Saturday, draining those threes in the fourth quarter. My oldest son's a big Steph fan. I'm a big Steph fan. That was awesome to watch. Again, what I love about sports is in the big moments, who steps up, who becomes the legend then. And Steph Curry, he said it was his first and probably only Olympics. That was a fourth quarter remember for him. And the other one, and I'm going to really try hard to pronounce his name right, the pommel horse guy, Stevan Nedorosik, right? From Worcester.
Yes.
Worcester. That was just money. They show him meditating. They show him getting ready. All the pressure's on him. He's there for one event, and he delivers. And that's what was awesome for me.
Steph Curry for me. Watching the Steph Curry cuts, wife, both sons going berserk, going nuts about it. Steph Curry, I've said this take on this podcast before. I'll do it again, and I'll probably always do it every time Steph Curry comes up for a new audience. If tomorrow the aliens invade planet Earth and they say, we want your athlete who represents the United States of America to complete an athletic task, I'm going to find Steph Curry, hand him a basketball, and say, please make this shot to save humankind. So Steph Curry to save all of mankind, that moment. Noah Lyles in the 100-meter, winning, but sort of not winning, but his torso got over first, but the commentator said it didn't, but the other guy's foot did. Loved it all. Loved everything about the 100-meter. That is the Super Bowl to me of the Olympic Games, and you can say you're the fastest man on earth. So give me the 100. Give me Steph Curry. I know I took a lot of grief on air about my Simone Biles take, but if you told me something to remember of 2024, I will remember that she was in 5 events, had a gold in 3 and a silver in 1. I will remember that. So I know mine's very American-based, but those are my 3, like Noah Lyles, Simone Biles, and Steph Curry. That's what's going to – you know what? If I had to pick a non-American storyline, though, and maybe it's the freshest in my head, gosh, I watched Italy dominate in women's volleyball, and I'm very fascinated about how in the world that happened. So if you've got to give me a non-American storyline, I will take Italy trying to figure out how the hell they got so good at women's volleyball. So, okay, that's the 2024 Olympics. I'm going to throw this storyline. Jason McIntyre, who's on Colin Coward before us, loves this segment of tomorrow's headlines today, where they try to predict the future of what's going to happen on a Friday show. We're on a Monday show. My guess for the 2028 Olympic Games, the 2 new stars of Team USA of any sport were not on a roster in 2024.
I'll give you the 2, and they're going to be on the same team.
Ooh, I wonder if we're thinking the same thing. Go ahead.
It's Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese.
Yes, ding, ding, ding. Totally with you. Why is that?
You go back to 2 years of NCAA tournament action where they developed a natural rivalry. They are having great years. I thought Team USA, the women's team, good for them. They won another gold. I felt Clark should have been on that team to help grow that sport. You're trying to do that, right? And Reese, I understand why Reese didn't get picked way back when they named the team. But if they had named the team 2 weeks before the Olympic Games, how do you keep her off? Right? She's had a great year. I honestly think some people might tell me I'm crazy. I think the Clark and Reese have a chance to be the Bird and Magic of their generation because they have enhanced the visibility of women's basketball more than any other before. And U.S. Diana Taurasi, I know, look, she's a great player. She's an all-time legend. Did she really need a 6th gold medal? I would have found a spot to get Clark on there. Just that team didn't get talked about enough during this tournament, but that changes if Caitlin Clark is there and even Angel Reese. Those are the two that's going to be their Olympics in 28.
100% with you. Those are the two. They will start getting hyped up about this in 2027.
Yeah.
It's in the United States. It's in Los Angeles. I know flag football is going to be out there. And some are going to argue it's going to be the year of American football, and the new era of football dominance will now become what basketball was in the early 90s. That could be a fun storyline. We could see if that crazy Australian breakdancer comes back, which I don't think she will. Like, we can find other 2028 fun storylines, but the answer is exactly what you said. It's Caitlin Clark and it's Angel Reese, and they will be the faces of the Olympics. The game that the women's basketball team played against France was fantastic. The problem with France and why they lost that game to Team USA is the woman who played for France thought she was Steph Curry and was trying to be Steph Curry. She was airball at every shot. So they probably, if they played better team basketball, France, they could have pulled off the upset. But you mentioned Bird and Magic. I'm a little too young to remember the impact of Bird and Magic, but it's one of those things that if you ask anybody who's a bit older than you, they'll say they changed the sport. The NBA Finals used to be on tape delay. It wasn't an international, right? Like, it changed the entire sport, that rivalry, with two well-known, traditionally powers in the NBA, and Larry Bird and Magic Johnson being there. Here's the thing. I go back to what you mentioned there about Caitlin Clark being on the team and Angel Reese. I can't stand my answer about the Caitlin Clark Angel Reese thing because I know for this medium I need to have a stronger take. Like, you're either in lane A or lane B. Come on, guys, sports radio boy, give me the take. Can't both people be right? Like, I'm with the take that for the visibility and popularity of women's basketball, Caitlin Clark should have been on the team. There are people who would have watched that game because Caitlin Clark is playing more so than not. So if I can make my sport more popular by doing this, I'm going to continue to do it. Yes, won't argue that. I think that's the right take. I also think the right take is people claim the reason she got left off the team is because he was going to be criticized, the coaches, about how much Caitlin Clark wasn't playing, and that would be a storyline that would take away the success of Team USA. That's also true. And some would say, well, guys, that's not fair. Like, who cares how much she doesn't play? Blah, blah, blah. No one should care. Okay, I watched SportsCenter and Fox and everyone else that complained about Jason Tatum not playing. Yep. So if they're complaining about Jason Tatum not playing for the men, that's about a third of what we would have got for Caitlin Clark. So there it is. Like, both people can be right, but I want to see them both play, and that is no doubt. Injuries, gosh, let's all hope and pray neither one gets hurt by 2028. I'm with you. That is the storyline I'm most impressed about for 2028.
I loved the NCAA men's basketball tournament this past March. It was great. I watched more of the women's tournament, and you start to watch it. You get interested in the players. You start to see it. I think the women's game is more pure, right? You don't have the dunking and all that stuff. It's more fundamentally sound is probably a better way to put it. It's a lot of fun to watch. And there were past years. I'm not going to lie to you. There were past years. I'd hear, the WNBA finals start next week. I'm like, I didn't even know the season was going. I just never paid attention to it. Now I do. And why? It's really because of those two. And you can really appreciate their greatness. And I knew the names of the top players, the Griner, Taurasi, Sue Bird, and whatnot. but they've changed it, and they're the fresh faces of it. And again, they're good for each other. They're good to build that rivalry. You have that natural thing. You have the LSU Iowa thing going 2 years in a row, and especially for us here in Albany, having it be in our backyard back in March. I think it's great for the game. If the 92 Dream Team could add Christian Leitner to carry everyone's luggage off the bus into the hotel, they could have found a way to get Caitlin Clark on that team.
Exactly right. Yeah. You know, I do want to I still got some few things we got to get to involving fantasy football because August feels like the fantasy football month. But I'm going to throw you a little curveball here because I know we were talking a lot of Olympics and you brought up a point I wonder about with college basketball next year, and more so women than men. I wonder how women's basketball is going to be marketed next year. I wonder how they're going to do it. They, ESPN, because they're the rights holders to the NCAA women's tournament and they have the most coverage of any network, because we've seen this for 30 years. ESPN picks one player, maybe two. Now the last 2 years with Angel Reese, but really it's been about Caitlin Clark of you got to tune in because you can't miss the greatness of Sue Bird, Diana Taurasi, Maya Moore, Brianna Stewart, Sabrina Ionescu, like Kelsey Plum, Caitlin Clark, where usually they just pick like one dominant superstar and said, you can't miss. Now, Caitlin Clark's popularity, with no disrespect to all those legends I just mentioned, went to a whole different stratosphere compared to everybody else. Why that happened might be for another podcast, but like I'm a little fast. Do you find that fascinating as someone who's covers sports for a living of what the storyline might be for an entire sport next year now that the most popular women's player for most people's lifetime is gone? Of how you let me rephrase this. You mentioned the Bird and Magic comparison. Yep. Wasn't there a little space between Bird and Magic and Jordan, or was it just straight Bird Magic? Okay, they're old. Jordan take over because Jordan came next.
Jordan did came next, and the best thing David Stern, I think they're hurting the NBA years down the road, and they got it fixed, was every promo back then was Jordan and the Bulls against Ewing and the Knicks. They promoted the individuals, and it took the NBA to the stratosphere, right? That's what I would do with NCAA basketball. I would identify the top players and promote them. You could tell people, hey, Iowa's playing Tennessee this week, but if you're not really a NCAA guy, you may not know who they are, or Tennessee's name. Pat Summitt built that program as legendary. UConn, but you got to know the stars because stars sell. That's what the NBA did back then. Yeah, Jordan was losing in the conference finals to the Pistons when during Magic's last year, the Lakers' last run into the finals, and then Jordan finally took over in the early 90s. But that's kind of how it happened. Yeah. The Pistons ended the Bird Celtics run, and then Jordan was probably 2 years behind that.
If you're Juju Watkins at USC, if you're Paige Buckers at UConn, Beckers, I should say, Paige Buckets is what her nickname is. Can be your nickname or last name. There's marketing for you, and you actually know the person's nickname as well as their last name. If you could find some things around who gets marketed, and just one quickly back to the both of those games. I'm a more of a college basketball fan than an NBA fan. I think that's more regionally of where I grew up in Syracuse and what sports I followed. The level of excitement and quality of an actual sport of Olympic pro, I guess you can call it pro still now, the pros play. Olympic basketball compared to a regular NBA game. Gosh, give me Olympic basketball all day long. Some dudes don't want to play in the NBA. Some guys want to take games. There was none of that. Every possession, everything mattered in those Olympic games. So I'm already looking forward to 2028 like you are. I'm also looking forward to winning a fantasy football championship this season. You and I have competed against one another in fantasy leagues before. We are both fantasy football fans. We're talking in August, about a month away from the season gets underway. Let me throw a very softball generic question because I always have to remember there's diehards like you and there's people who are still getting used to it and still doing it for the first time. Let's talk draft strategy. So I'm very simple, one quarterback, the regular roster league, so nothing crazy, no dynasty, no keeper. if someone's pulling up their fantasy team for the first time, 12-team league, give me your strategy in 2024. And if it's different than strategies you may have used in the past.
I have to change my strategy after, I don't know, 20 years. I have to stop. I have to stop. My fantasy baseball league is in our 35th year, by the way.
Woo!
Yeah. I have to get away from the strategy that when I go to click a guy to pick him, I have to no longer take the best rater available. And I do. And Levack can vouch for that. So I make it very difficult for him each year to get his Raiders because I'll take Daniel Carlson in the third round if I need it. There's a guy. I'm not going to be quiet about it. There's a guy out there that I love, and I'm going to take him probably earlier than a lot of other teams will. I think the superstar of the year, the breakout, is Jaden Daniels in Washington. I love him. And I was praying the Raiders could move up to draft him. The Commanders weren't trading him, and I had trading that pick, and I wouldn't either. I think Jaden Daniels is going to explode this year, and he's a guy you can let other people take Mahomes and some of the other quarterbacks. I think Jaden Daniels is going to have a great year. I want him on all my teams.
I don't know if you and I drank the same thing today. I don't know if you and I have been hanging out too often. I don't know if I'll go as far as to say he's who I really want in fantasy because I have some questions about his ability, but I will add to the Washington Commander hype this season. If you missed it, our way too early NFL preview show, I had as my biggest, boldest take of the season is that the Washington Commanders are going to win 10 games this season and get to the postseason.
Really?
That was my, right? Like with Dan Quinn and because of the schedule. So if you're right, I'm right. And if I'm right, you're right. So here we go. We've both become Commander supporters this upcoming season. He looked okay. He looked fine against the Jets in the preseason game. First time as a starter. Some would say great. Some would say stuff to improve on. So you're going with a young rookie. And let's also remember history, right? Like, I know it's almost a decade plus ago, but Washington in year one with Robert Griffin III, This is a franchise that I believe the stat is 8 straight week ones with 8 different starters. The best they had was RG3 a long time ago, and he got into the postseason that rookie season before he played through that knee injury. So I love that pick. My strategy for fantasy this year, though, and it goes to that quarterback position. And this was my strategy last year, and I yelled it to whoever wanted to hear it. It sounds so basic, but it didn't feel basic last year. Hey, I'm guy off the street. I've never played fantasy football before. How do you play? Well, you build a roster, you draft guys who score points. Okay, that seems easy enough. Who scores the most points? Well, quarterbacks. Okay, what quarterback scores the most points? Patrick Mahomes. Wouldn't you want him on all your teams if that guy scores the... Well, I used that theory, the basic 101 question, and I drafted Mahomes in like every league last year. Did I reach on him sometime? Yeah, but I'm like, he scores the most. Let me not overthink this. Let me just draft Mahomes in as many leagues as I can get him. Now, if people remember Patrick Mahomes, they sure remember him winning the Super Bowl. Fantasy players will remember him being the 8th or 9th, depending on your league, scoring quarterback. Him and Baker Mayfield weren't too far away on points. So my theory of just draft the highest scoring player didn't work out for me last year. New strategy, similar to you. I'm going to get big play receivers and hope I play in a lot of bonus leagues. So I absolutely love Tyreek Hill. Oh, Goz is taking Tyreek Hill. No, like Tyreek Hill-like players. So if I can get a guy who can get me 150 yards and 2 touchdowns or a 200-yard game, I'm talking like Tyreek Hill, like Cooper Kupp, obviously McCaffrey. I'm trying to think of another example of Rashad White, who had a ton of touches last year for the Bucs. Like, I want guys who keep hitting 100, 150, 200. Yeah. That way, if they have a monster, huge game at least twice in a season, I get bonus points if you play in leagues with bonuses. So, new strategy. Give me guys who have monster individual weeks and hope I just lap people when this all said and done.
It used to be you got to build with running backs because they touch the ball 20 times a game. Well, guess what? The game's changed. And now you can invest early on a top running back and he might get 12 touches because he's got his the guy carrying the bag is coming in for 8 or 9 rushes because the NFL has devalued the running back position so much. None of them get paid anymore. That you're right. I think the receivers are the way to go. You just got to get the right one, and sometimes you can't even look at. Like you could look at naysayers would look at Justin Jefferson and say, "Oh, who's going to throw to him? Sam Darnold or JJ McCarthy? Who cares? Because he's going to go get it, right? You got to go get him and go get your studs, and those are the guys. I think sometimes I get too old school. Like I will not draft anybody in the Raider division because I don't want to root for them. Chiefs,
I get
Chargers,
it.
Broncos, no thanks. No thanks.
It's the oddest, strangest, weirdest, most uncomfortable. Probably, if this was dating, the biggest turnoff for people for fantasy football. I don't want to root against my favorite team. Why would you give me reasons to root against my favorite team? It's so simple. It makes so much sense. Of I don't want to root against them all season long, and that's why people avoid it. Here's the thing I think that would, and I wonder if you have one of these. So I'll go first on this. I'll answer my own question before I present it to you as we get deeper into the show.
Sure.
One of the things that I used to always get the question of is who is your fantasy football sleeper? Like who's somebody nobody's talking about this season that can win you a league? And if you ask me that question now in 2024, it's way different of what I think about it in 2019 and way different what I think about it in 2014. What I mean by that is that like, when people would say the word sleeper back in the day, they meant like, who can I get in like the 7th or 8th round that nobody knows about my league? And that used to be just like a rookie wide receiver if you had friends who didn't follow college football. Okay, that's not so bad. Or it'd be like some running back who is a backup. Okay, that's not so bad. Now everybody wants, tell me the 17th round pick who is a third string pre-season. I don't even know if the word sleeper exists anymore because so many people play fantasy. There's so much coverage. I'm not going to give you a guy in the 15th round who's going to win you a championship anymore. You have to find him in the waiver wire. So if you told me to give you a sleeper for fantasy,
yeah,
I would just say Cooper Kupp, just because like my new answer is I'm going to take people who come off of injuries and people forgot how good they are. Like Cooper Kupp got hurt. He's been really good in the past. Mark Andrews got hurt. He's been really good in the past. My new answer, Joe Burrow got hurt. My new answer is if you want a sleeper, take guys who got hurt. So of all those players, I didn't even say my favorite. I'll add one other one. Nick Chubb. There's my sleeper. Nick Chubb got hurt. He's been great for the last 8 years. So there's my new answers. Everybody ask me a fantasy football sleeper. Take who got hurt because there's people in leagues that I'm sure you have these people who will never draft them because, oh, they got hurt last year. They could get hurt for me. That doesn't really make sense, but people think and draft like that.
You know what? It's because they burn you.
Yes.
I had Joe Burrow. I'm in 4 leagues. I had Joe Burrow in 2 of my leagues last year. And guess what? I was watching the playoffs because you know it's killer. So and you're right. You got to get through that bad feeling that one year is not the other. You know, and that's what makes it tough. I'll give you a guy. You're not going to get him late, but you can get him in the middle. And I'm going back to my safe place for this pick. Jacoby Myers for the Raiders. He has been their best player in camp so far this year. Devontae Adams is going to he'll draw the double coverage if there is some. And with Brock Bowers and Michael Mayer coming through the middle as a tight end, Jacoby Myers is going to probably see a lot of single coverage. And he had a great year last year for them, better than I thought he would. Because before last year, all I knew from Jacoby Myers was he threw the ill-fated lateral trying to throw it back to Mac Jones 2 years ago where Chandler Jones intercepted it midfield and won the game for the Raiders on the last play of the game. But Jacoby Myers has been the best Raider in camp this year. He's a great guy to go get in the middle rounds.
We've only got about 5 minutes left of this Levack Goz Pugsley's Pit Invasion Digital Takeover. So for like the next 3 to 5 minutes, here's what I'm going to do. And we can break early if you want because you are a very busy man. I appreciate you giving me 3 hours on a Monday. Thank you for doing this. For those people who are maybe listening from outside of the capital region, for those people who are getting ready for the fall like you and I are, where can they find your stuff? Not just here on the digital side, but What does the September, October, November schedule look like for Sean Martin around the 518?
Oh, well, high school football will get ramped up on Friday nights. You can find me on a sideline with my clipboard, microphone in hand, and my pen. Saturday, it's usually cross country meets for me. Then we hit October, and I've covered Union and RPI hockey since 2010. So I expect to be in the rinks again this year, covering the local teams, and really looking forward to the college hockey season. Then once we get through that, we get into this and get some high school hoops in, maybe a little high school basketball, wherever they need me. And in the spring, it's usually track and field, which I love doing it. And so that's what's coming up. So it's a couple more weeks of my summer vacation from there, and look forward to getting back into the greatest part-time gig you could ever ask for. Going to sporting events, talking to coaches and talking to great student athletes and writing about sports and making some cash on the side.
You will see him all around the 518 this upcoming fall, doing his thing. One other thing before we break, because I haven't told you this. I'll tell you this on the air. We'll have to talk about this during one of the breaks, or we'll probably have to talk because we talk during the week as much as we can. You've inspired me, my friend, because you are an author of 2 books.
Yes.
I have a book that is almost done that I got to get some feedback from you on, and I'm a little nervous as you are a professional writer to get feedback from a professional writer about the book. But you've inspired me to write a book, and I'll tell you more about it later. But you have written 2. For those who don't know, let's talk about the 2 books that are now available for purchase.
Yeah, I wrote a book a few years ago. People talk about, you ever hear people throw a thing, if you were to write a letter to your 18-year-old self, what would you say as you get older, right? I didn't do that. I have twin boys that are going to be 8 in September. And I was older first-time dad. I was 50 when my boys were born. So I wrote a book to them called Dear Liam and Noah, Letters from Daddy. It's experiences on my life that are common, that they're going to go through, school, handling friendships as you grow up, paying attention to your grades, keeping an eye on what's important in your professional career, just different life circumstances that come up. What did I do well, and what did I do that could have been better? Right. So I wrote a book on that, and that was actually very interesting to write because I learned a lot about, I think, my life growing up. For context, my father passed away when I was 6 weeks before I was 9. So I had probably a different sort of upbringing than a lot of people in a 2-family home. So I just talked about my experience. Hopefully they don't ever experience that, but this is what I did. I moved around a lot when I was a kid. I was always the new kid, and we'll get to that in a second. How did I handle that? How could I have done better? When I went to college, I found my footing. I made a ton of friends. Wasn't academically committed as much as I should have been. That was wrong. Okay. So don't learn what I did. Learn from my mistakes was my point, and try and improve on that. And then I just had a book published in this past May, a children's book called The 3 Bulls, where there's a new kid in town, Darius, and his dad's not home, and he's having trouble making friends. Going back to my experience of being the new kid in schools, I went to 5 schools in 6 years growing up. We moved around a lot, and his grandmother takes him to a park playground. They have what's called a buddy bench, which they have at our elementary school. You sit there with hopes that kids come over and introduce themselves, and you make a friend. Through the end of the book, the story becomes that Darius meets 2 kids who happen to be named Liam and Noah, as crazy as that is, and they become lifelong friends. And they went over and saw him on the bench. They said hi, and it takes them through to their senior years. So it was kind of fun to do that and kind of relay at least what I had gone through as a kid and how it worked out for those 3.
Do yourself a favor, purchase them, go out and support, do all those great things. Awesome stories from our friend Sean Martin. Pugsley's Pit available, Apple, Spotify. Download, subscribe, rate, and review. Thank you for doing this. I know you're super busy. I appreciate you paving the new wave on Fox Sports 95.9 and 980, opening up the capital region to traditional and podcast versions, consuming content in different ways. Hopefully people enjoyed this. And as I said to you last time, and I held my word to this, I knew this wouldn't be the last time. You're back again this time. And who knows? I got a baby on the way in November. The next time we might hear you on Fox Sports, it could be just two Raider fans celebrating on the air for 3 hours if Levack says you're filling in with him. So who knows? I'm very likely this won't be the last time with your voice on Fox Sports 95.9 and 980.
We'll do it. I appreciate you having me. And by the way, the books are available on Amazon. Got to throw that in. But I really appreciate it, love it, and enjoy catching up with you guys whenever I can.
Now, we have a different sign-off here on Pugsley's Pit on Levack and Goz. We say, wash your hands, don't touch your face, and Goz hit the button. Now, I can't hit the button because you did the tech side of this today. So wash your hands, don't touch your face, and Pugsley, Sean Martin, you hit the button.
You got it. Enjoy your day.